Hi guys. All right, here we are, chapter 19. We are finally to animals that you are probably very familiar with. These are endothermic vertebrates, and they are animals that produce their own heat internally. So they have cells that are going through cellular respiration, just like yours are, to produce ATP. And one of the byproducts of these chemical reactions is heat. And so other animals do that too, insects and reptiles and all those guys, but they don't work as hard to maintain that heat or have body structures that help them keep the heat in. These endothermic vertebrates are birds and mammals, and they are working to eat more often. They have layers of insulation like fat or blubber to help hold in their heat. They also have hair or feathers, and so that the heat consistency is much more important to them. Okay, so here are a bunch of birds. Birds are classified in all different ways. Your book puts them into these 9 categories. Shorebirds, first of all, and so that first little picture up there is a little plover, and they live their lives right there on the shore. And if you've ever been to the beach, you have seen them. They are constantly searching along the sand right up by where the water is coming up, looking for things floating, other like little crustacean or bits of algae even, and they are eating. They use those long beaks to snatch things up. Then you have seabirds, so that's a little seagull. They can fly over the water and dive down. They can float on the water like that one is and catch fish that way. So it's a water-based lifestyle. They do, though, have to go onto shore to lay eggs. Then we have the wading bird. So I picked that picture because I like that little guy's bright yellow feet. So again, stay right by the water or wade out into the water and look for fish. Mainly look for smaller crustaceans, even some like echinoderms, starfish, those kinds of things. Anything that they can pick up, they will try and eat. Raptors, so we have an eagle there. They are hunters. They have very strong talons that grasp. They swoop down and pick things up with those talons and then take them somewhere and use their beaks to tear up their prey. Then you have hummingbirds, that cute little guy. They are nectar drinkers, and so they are very specialized and very tiny. The flightless birds, emus, and of course there's an ostrich. They are just too big to fly, but they do still have the feathers, do still have a similar bone structure. Waterfowl, they live in and around water. They are not quite they have a different, I guess, diet for one thing from some of the other water birds that we have talked about. They tend to eat algae or bugs or grasses even, and they tend to have heavier, bigger bodies and have feet that are much more designed for swimming. The game birds, these are the ones that we're familiar with, a lot of them, because we eat them. That's a pheasant, which some of you may have eaten, but game birds would also include turkeys and chickens and things that we hunt or things that we can go to the grocery store and get. And then the last one, the perching birds. These are birds that whenever they land on something, their feet automatically will curl around and hold on to it. These are seed eaters for the most part. Some of them are like robins, eat worms or other small insects. They come in a wide variety of sizes and shapes. If you have a canary, you have a perching bird. And so wide variety of sizes and body styles and eating styles and habitats, and they are super cool. Okay, so now this whole avian structure thing. So when you are a bird, obviously one of the big things that you do is fly. And so they have to have some structures that help them do that, and probably the most important is their bone structure. They have have an internal structure, the bones themselves, and I have like a little cross-section picture up there, that make the bones very lightweight and very strong. So they have lots of air pockets basically in them. Your bones are much more solid than that, but this inner structure within these bones is very strong because of all the kind of the cross sections and the overlap of those little parts inside. But there's lots of air in there too, and that helps them to stay light. Birds, for the most part, have bones that are pretty well fused together, and so they're almost one solid piece, even though there are individual bones. They also have a keel, and a keel is a large kind of flat structure that sits on their breastbone, and that's where the wings attach. No other mammal has that. And then, of course, the wings. Birds have different types of wings that depend on how they spend the majority of their time in flight. And you have 4 main categories, and so this picture over here shows kind of the general shape of the wing. And so the high lift wings, basically these are the birds that tend to soar, and they try and stay up high to look for prey. They're able to stay aloft without a lot of movement of their wings, but they're also very able to direct their movements very quickly with their end feathers. Then soaring wings, this is what on the picture is labeled as active. They also are soaring. Most of these birds tend to be more of the water birds, and so they are doing a little, they're closer down usually to the surface of the water. They can also tuck their wings in very quickly and dive. And so they're a little bit more active as far as flying goes. Then you have the high speed wings. And so these are birds that are either have to work a little harder to fly, like a duck because of a heavy body, or tend to need to fly a little bit faster, possibly to catch prey. And then the last one, the elliptical wings, and so it has more of a broad type wing. These are wings that help birds to change direction quickly, that help them to fly quickly, and to like chase after bugs and whatnot, and kind of keep up with them. Okay, so now obviously if you're talking about birds, you have to talk some about feathers. And so feathers are there to cushion and insulate. They also help to reduce air resistance. They're smooth and make the bird a little bit more streamlined. There are 2 main types of feathers. You have contour feathers, which are what we see. They're the outermost feathers. They're colorful. They're usually a little bit larger. And on certain birds like ducks or waterfowl, they tend to have an oily feel to them to help them be a little bit water resistant. And then birds have down feathers, and these are the innermost feathers. This is a very soft, kind of fluffy layer that is there for warmth. So if you have like a pillow, like a feather pillow filled with feathers, it would be filled with these down feathers. They're the soft, fluffy ones. Then a couple other things, or one other thing that the birds use that is useful as far as flight goes, are air sacs. Birds typically have 9 air sacs that hold extra air, and that extra air, first of all, helps them to stay light, again, which is really important for flying, but it also is extra storage for oxygen, because flying takes a lot of oxygen. So it's just like, running a lot, but even more so. And so they kind of rotate the air through these different air sacs in order to supply more oxygen to the muscles. It also is a good way for birds to help maintain their body temperature. All the muscle work that goes into flying takes up a lot of, or produces a lot of heat. And so this air is one way to get that heat released pretty quickly. Okay, so here we are, the avian systems. So first thing, circulation. So birds have a 4-chambered heart. It is large comparatively, at least for their body size. Their heart beats very rapidly. This is because they have a high metabolism, first of all, but also because things like flying take a lot of oxygen, and so they have to be in continuous supply, and so lots of pumping of the blood, and so it's carrying everything that your blood carries: oxygen, CO2, that's a waste product, carries nutrients from the food, and then waste. And so very complex compared to some that we've talked about. Then digestion. So starts with the beak. Birds all have beaks made of keratin, and so similar to like your fingernails. And this beak is used to capture prey. It can be used just to pick up seeds. Can be very curved or flat or skinny, whatever it is. It's very specific to what they eat. They don't have teeth, so the food is swallowed whole and it passes right down the esophagus. So here's the esophagus, is this little tube, like your esophagus is just this throat, and goes right to the crop. And just like in some of the other animals we've talked about, the crop is a storage sack, essentially. They're eating all the time, and so sometimes the food has to kind of wait to get into the stomach because they are already working on digesting some things. So now the stomach, there are actually two stomachs. The first one is where chemical digestion takes place. And so that's this, they, on my picture that I have up there, have it labeled the proventriculus. And then that is chemical digestion, where enzymes are actually added to chemically break down the food. And once that has started, the food moves into the gizzard. And so here's the gizzard next. And it's a very muscular organ that can grind the food up. Lots of birds will swallow small pebbles or even grains of sand, and it will stay in their gizzard and will help them kind of as part of something for the food to kind of be ground up against. And then once everything is digested and is in very small pieces, it moves into the intestine. And this is where the nutrients are absorbed, water can be absorbed. The ceca that they have labeled on here is most likely where the water is absorbed for most birds. And that goes into that cloaca, which we've mentioned with the reptiles. And again, they don't have separate openings for liquid waste and solid waste. Everything comes out the same place, which is the cloaca. And then last thing, the nervous system. Most birds have an excellent sense of sight. Depending on the bird, they have better vision than most people. They have good hearing and no sense of smell, but they do have the ability to navigate over long distances. I wasn't really sure where to put that in. That's not necessarily a nervous system trait, but it is part of their sensory system to be able to detect north-south, direction, all those kinds of things. So they have kind of a built-in GPS. Okay, so now reproduction. So it's spring right now. Most of you probably, hopefully, have been outside a little bit during all of this and have heard the birds singing. Most likely that is either a bird trying to attract a mate, or a male bird saying to other male birds, this is my territory and stay out. But they do sing to attract mates. Sometimes the males in particular, sometimes both male and female, will do kind of like a courtship ritual where they dance or do like a display of their feathers, and can be very very detailed and very entertaining. If you again Google bird courtship rituals or something like that, all kinds of amazing dancing going on there. Now, as far as the feathers go, males are usually much more brightly colored. Again, this is kind of to make them stand out a little bit for the females. They want to look good. Also, it helps to kind of tell other males, hey, stay out. Females are usually much more camouflaged as far as their colors go. This is so they can sit on the nest and be as protected as possible from predators. So there, of course, is a little cardinal couple, and he is very, very bright and she is not. So now birds, fertilization is internal, And once fertilization has occurred, the female will lay her eggs, and they pass out of her body through the cloaca. And in the egg, we've already talked about this when we talked about reptiles, there's a yolk for nourishment, a couple of other things just to cushion the embryo as it grows. And then, of course, a very tough external shell. Bird eggs are much different than reptile eggs because they have more calcium. So they have a hard shell and not that leathery shell. The eggs are incubated by the female. The male sometimes leaves, sometimes he's done after fertilization occurs. Sometimes, and for most birds, the male will bring food to the female as she sits on the eggs. Sometimes they will even trade places, and he will incubate or warm the eggs for a little bit. But they will, in general, stay together for a season and build this nest and raise these eggs or incubate their eggs. And then once the mating season is over and they migrate to warmer areas, they don't stay together. Some birds do, but most don't. Now, as far as the young, most of them are cared for at least until they are able to fly and leave the nest. Some families will remain together in flocks, basically, until the young find mates of their own. But birds do tend to be very maternal, very caring of the birds in the nest. And so you may be seeing some of this right now. It's the time for eggs to be hatching, so go outside and look. Okay, so last thing, of course, in the environment. So birds, just like insects, because of their ability to fly, live in areas all over the world. And they move very often with the seasons for food supply. They will go wherever the food is, essentially. Some of them go to certain places during the breeding season. And so some migrate over extremely long distances. And again, that goes back to their ability to navigate, essentially. And so they're very mobile, again, because of their ability to fly. Birds are a huge part of the food chain. They will eat everything from algae to fish to small mammals. An eagle can pick up, like a small dog, essentially. And so they're pretty wide as far as the amount of different types of foods that they will eat. And then I didn't really put this, but they're, of course, a big part of our food chain. People eat a large, wide variety of birds, of course, mostly chicken for most of us. And so they are extremely important as far as our nutrition goes, but also as an industry. And so they are extremely well studied, very, very cool. I would recommend that you get outside a little bit right now, and you're going to see lots of birds. All right. Okay, so we'll have one more video after this over the mammals. And anyway, let me know if you have questions, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.